I arrived in Wexford on a freezing January morning, the streets empty and silent. My goal was simple: explore, photograph, and feel the pulse of a city I'd never visited. Snow fell gently, coating old brick buildings in a thick white blanket. I wandered past the deserted market square and into narrow alleys lined with shuttered windows. Something felt off. Perhaps it was the stillness, or the way the wind carried strange whispers through the streets. By evening, I found a small inn near the old docks and decided to check in. But the moment I entered the reception, a chill ran down my spine. The inn seemed alive in a way I couldn't describe. The inn room was tiny, its walls lined with faded wallpaper, and a single window overlooked the frozen docks. As I unpacked, I noticed strange symbols etched faintly into the wooden beams. The creaking of the floorboards sounded exaggerated, almost like footsteps following me. At first, I shrugged it off as imagination, but when the clock struck midnight, whispers came from the hallway. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Yet, the hairs on my arms stood on end. Sleep did not come easily that night. Breakfast was silent, almost ritualistic. The innkeeper, a thin, pale man, barely looked at me. His smile was too wide, too forced. I noticed other guests in the dining room, huddled and staring into their plates. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like marionettes. As I left for the streets, I felt their eyes following me. Wexford's charm seemed like a mask over something much darker. Even in daylight, the city whispered secrets I wasn't supposed to hear. I explored the town center, taking photos of frost-covered statues and bridges. But each time I turned a corner, shadows seemed to twitch unnaturally. In the abandoned theater, I saw a figure vanish behind a velvet curtain. It felt deliberate, a warning perhaps. My camera caught glimpses of movement my eyes missed. Even the cheerful signs of winter festivals felt tainted. I began to question if I was seeing Wexford, or some twisted reflection of it. That night, I tried to sleep, but the walls seemed to breathe. A soft tapping came from the ceiling, slow and deliberate. I pressed my face into the pillow, hoping it would stop. Then a whisper, close to my ear: "You shouldn't be here." I froze. The shadows in the corners of my room shifted as if alive. I realized that whatever haunted Wexford had noticed me. I was no longer just a visitor. I had become part of the city's secret. Morning came with a pale, metallic light that barely warmed the frost on the window. I went downstairs, hoping for normal human interaction, but the dining room was empty except for the innkeeper. He watched me with unblinking eyes, his hands motionless on the counter. I asked him about the strange noises at night, but he only tilted his head, as if trying to interpret the words. "Old houses complain," he finally whispered, though his tone held a warning. Outside, the streets looked deserted again, but fresh footprints led toward the industrial outskirts. Something told me I should follow them. And yet, with each step, the silence deepened, thickened, as though the city itself held its breath. The footprints ended near an abandoned factory. Its tall windows were shattered, and a faint hum resonated from within, though the place looked decades dead. Inside, dust coated everything like gray snow. Machinery stood frozen mid-motion, as if someone had stopped time. Then I noticed a trail of disturbed dust leading deeper into the darkness. My flashlight flickered, failing to cut more than a thin path ahead. I felt watched, not by a person, but by the entire building. A gust of icy air rushed past me, slamming a metal door somewhere in the halls. I should have turned back, but curiosity pulled me in like a hook. In the farthest corridor, I found a small office with files scattered across the floor. Most were unreadable, water-damaged and moldy. One document, however, remained intact. A list of names with dates. Many names were crossed out. My heartbeat grew louder as I found the most recent entry, my own name, written in crooked handwriting. The date was yesterday. My throat tightened. Someone knew I had arrived, monitored me, and predicted I'd reach this place. Suddenly the humming stopped. The silence was absolute, suffocating. Behind me, a soft scrape echoed, like something dragging across the floor. I spun around, but my flashlight failed, casting only a dying glow. In that half-light, I saw a silhouette, tall, thin, with limbs too long to be human. It didn't move, yet every instinct screamed that it was aware of me. The air thickened, making it hard to breathe. I stumbled backward, knocking over a metal drawer that echoed through the halls like a gunshot. The figure twitched. Not a step, more like a sudden distortion of space around it. Panic surged. I ran, guided only by memory and faint outlines. The factory seemed to twist, hallways shifting like a maze. I burst outside through a side door and collapsed into the snow. The cold burned my lungs, but I welcomed it, proof that I had escaped the nightmare inside. The factory loomed behind me like a sleeping beast. No movement, no sound. As though nothing had happened. I hurried back toward the inn, constantly checking over my shoulder. The streets felt even emptier than before, suffocating in their silence. When I finally reached my room, a folded note awaited on my pillow. 4 words, written in the same crooked handwriting. You're not done yet. Sleep refused to come. Every creak of the building echoed like a warning. I kept rereading the note, its crooked letters seeming to shift under the dim lamp. Who had entered my room? How? By dawn, I felt as if I hadn't rested at all. The innkeeper avoided my eyes during breakfast, which was somehow worse than his fixed stare. I stepped outside into the biting cold, needing air. The streets were coated in fresh snow, but no footprints, not even my own from last night, remained. It was as if the city had erased everything. As I walked deeper into Wexford, the fog thickened, swallowing buildings whole. Then, faintly, I heard someone calling my name. Not shouting, whispering, drawing me in. I followed the whisper through the fog until shapes of buildings distorted into unfamiliar silhouettes. The city no longer resembled the Wexford I had arrived in. The roads twisted unnaturally, looping back on themselves. At an intersection, I saw a woman standing motionless in the snow, her back turned to me. Something about her posture was wrong, too stiff, too deliberate. I called out, but she didn't respond. When I took a step closer, her head rotated, not her body, just her head, slowly, impossibly far. Her eyes were glassy, pupils huge and hollow. Not ready, she murmured, voice echoing like 2 overlapping whispers. I stumbled away, heart pounding as the fog seemed to swallow her whole. Shaken, I tried to retrace my steps, but the street signs had changed. Buildings now loomed in unfamiliar angles, leaning inward like they were listening. Snowflakes drifted downward in slow, unnatural spirals. When I finally reached the market square, I froze. The statues had moved. I was certain of it. The stone figures that had once faced the fountain now turned outward, forming a circle as if guarding something. At the center lay a shallow depression in the snow, as though something large had rested there. A pulse of cold air washed over me, carrying a metallic scent. I realized then that the city wasn't merely strange, it was alive, shifting, rearranging itself based on my presence. Anxious to escape the square, I headed toward the docks, hoping the familiar path remained unchanged. To my relief, the fog began to lift near the water. But the docks themselves were silent, boats frozen in ice, ropes stiff and brittle. As I stepped onto the pier, I saw a figure sitting at the edge, legs hanging above the black water. A boy, maybe 12. He didn't look up as I approached. "They don't like when you wander," he said softly. His breath didn't fog in the cold air. "Who are they?" I asked, but he shook his head. "They listen." Before I could speak again, he slid into the water without a splash, disappearing into the darkness below. I staggered back from the edge, my pulse racing. The water remained still, reflecting only gray sky. I needed answers, anything to make sense of Wexford's shifting reality. But when I turned toward the inn, I saw movement in the windows of the surrounding buildings. Faces. Dozens of them. Pale, expressionless, watching from behind frosted glass. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They only followed me with their eyes as I stepped backward. A pressure settled on my chest, heavy and paralyzing. The city wasn't simply observing me anymore, it was studying me. And whatever lived beneath its quiet surface was beginning to take interest. Dangerous interest. I hurried back toward the inn, refusing to look at the windows. The faces followed anyway. Felt them trailing me like cold fingertips along my spine. When I stepped inside, the inn was darker than usual, as if the building itself dimmed the lights in anticipation. The innkeeper wasn't behind the counter. Instead, a small brass key lay atop a folded map. The map showed Wexford, but not as I had seen it. New alleys, strange symbols, and circles in places that shouldn't exist were drawn in red ink. My room number was marked with a black X. As I reached for the key, the building groaned, long and low, like something waking up beneath the floorboards. I snatched the map and fled to my room before the shadows could shift again. Inside my room, I spread the map across the bed. The red circles formed a pattern, spiral-like, tightening toward a single point near the outskirts. A place labeled only, "The Hollow." The name alone sent a shiver through me. As I traced the routes, the temperature dropped drastically. My breath fogged. Then the whispers began again, but this time they came from inside the walls. They pressed in from all sides, overlapping, as though dozens of unseen mouths were trying to speak at once. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the voices only grew clearer. "Find the hollow," they urged. "Finish what began." I didn't know what that meant, but I knew staying in the inn another night was no longer an option. I packed quickly, barely thinking. My camera, the map, the key, those were enough. As I stepped into the hallway, every door was slightly open, though I knew they'd been shut before. Darkness filled each room like a thick liquid. Something shuffled behind one door, soft but unmistakably close. I kept moving, refusing to look. On the first floor, the lobby was empty again, but the front door stood wide open, letting in a blast of winter air. Snow drifted inside in thin, ghostly sheets. Outside, the sky had darkened unnaturally fast, as if night was swallowing the day whole. I stepped onto the street, and behind me the inn's door slammed shut with a force that vibrated through the pavement. Following the map, I walked toward the outskirts. The city grew stranger with each block, street lamps flickered in perfect sync, houses leaned inward as though conspiring. Even the snow seemed wrong, falling upward in an occasional, unsettling drift. Soon the residential streets gave way to open fields. A vast expanse of untouched white stretched before me. In the center stood a wooden sign half buried in the snow. Carved into it, barely legible, "The Hollow." The world around me grew still. Even the wind held its breath. I stepped forward, the snow crunching softly beneath my boots, and felt as though I had crossed an unseen threshold. The deeper I walked into the open fields, the more the landscape shifted. The snow no longer felt like snow, too smooth, too perfect, almost polished. Strange shapes protruded beneath the surface, as if buried structures lay just below my feet. The air vibrated softly, like a distant hum resonating through bone rather than ear. At the center of the field, I found a circular clearing where the snow thinned, revealing dark, frozen soil. Footprints, hundreds of them, spiraled toward the middle. But they weren't human. Each print had too many toes, too long, arranged in a pattern that made my skin crawl. And at the heart of the spiral stood a door. A freestanding wooden door frame, leading to nowhere, yet exuding a weight of purpose. As I approached, it slowly creaked open by itself. I hesitated before the door, unsure whether stepping through would end everything or begin something far worse. The hum in the air intensified, vibrating in my ribs. Snow around the clearing subtly shifted, as if breathing. I reached out and touched the wooden frame, warm. Too warm for winter. Then the whispers returned, no longer scattered or frantic. One single voice now. Calm, patient, come through. I pushed the door open wider. On the other side, instead of the field, there was darkness, velvety, dense, pulsing with faint luminescence like deep ocean water. I stuck out my hand. Nothing stopped it. The doorway wasn't a trick of light. I stepped through. Instantly the air thickened, heavy like syrup. The ground beneath me wasn't snow or soil. It was something spongy, absorbing my weight with a faint pulse. No sky, no horizon, only an endless gradient of shadow. But the worst part was the silence. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was an active suppression, as if something enormous pressed its palm over this entire dimension. Only my heartbeat echoed, too loud, too irregular. Then, ahead, small lights ignited one by one, hanging in the air like lanterns. They formed a winding trail. And though every instinct told me not to follow, I had no other direction to go. The lights swayed gently, as if aware of me. As I followed them, the ground changed texture, firmer now, smoother, like polished stone. The shadows deepened until they formed walls on either side, creating a corridor that narrowed as I walked. Something scuttled above, unseen but quick. I tried not to look up. The corridor ended abruptly at a massive structure. A tower, impossibly tall, its surface shifting like liquid metal. At its base, a doorway yawned open. The air from within was warm and damp, carrying a faint scent of earth and old wood. Something familiar. Something from Wexford. Inside the tower, the floor was covered in shallow water that rippled without touch. The walls pulsed softly, as if the tower was alive, breathing in slow, deliberate cycles. At the center stood a pedestal made of the same metal-like substance. Resting on it, a camera. My camera. The one I had left in the inn 5 hours ago. I approached cautiously. The camera's indicator light blinked, though it had no battery. I lifted it, warm, almost feverish, and checked the screen. A single new photo had appeared. Taken, from behind me. In the frame stood a tall, impossible figure, blurred but towering. Its head nearly grazed the ceiling. I spun around, but nothing was there. The room was empty except for the rippling water and the slow pulse of the walls. I checked the camera again. The timestamp was from 1 minute in the future. My chest tightened. The lights in the tower dimmed, then shifted color, blue to red, red to violet. A low groan rolled through the structure. The photograph changed. The figure was closer now. A second photo appeared automatically. Then a third, each one bringing it impossibly nearer, its limbs elongating, joints bending wrong. It was approaching without moving. Or perhaps time was folding around it. I backed away until my shoulders pressed against the breathing wall. The metal surface contracted at my touch, as if acknowledging me. The photos kept appearing. Dozens now. Each one capturing the creature from angles impossible for a stationary camera. Its many-limbed silhouette filled more and more of the frame. Then all at once the screen went black. A single word materialized: return. The tower rumbled violently. The doorway behind me snapped open, revealing darkness deeper than before. With no other choice, I ran. The darkness swallowed me instantly, but the ground was solid beneath my feet. I ran blindly until faint light flickered ahead. Bursting through, I found myself back in the field, but changed. The sky above churned like boiling ink. The hollow's sign lay snapped in half. Snow fell in spiraling patterns, forming symbols I didn't recognize. The footprints around me were fresh again, spiraling inward, converging toward the door behind me. But the door was gone. Instead, something pressed upward from beneath the snow, distorting the surface. Rising. A crack split the snow, long and deliberate. Steam hissed out, warm and foul, carrying the scent of wet stone and decayed leaves. The ground bulged, then broke open. A massive shape unfurled, shifting like a creature waking from centuries of sleep. I stumbled backward, slipping. The snow beneath me writhed, as if alive. The emerging form towered higher, limbs unfolding like branches of a dead tree. Its surface was neither flesh nor stone, something in between, glistening, ancient. It turned toward me without eyes. And I felt its attention pierce straight through my ribs. The world bent, not metaphorically. The field literally warped, tilting toward the being as if gravity favored it. My legs buckled. I tried crawling, but the ground pulled me backward. The creature raised one elongated limb, and the air thickened with pressure. The hum from the other side of the door returned, louder, sharper, drilling into my skull. Snow lifted into the air, swirling around the being. And then, with impossible clarity, a human voice echoed from within its core. "You opened the path." I screamed, not in fear, but to drown out the penetrating hum. It didn't work. The creature lowered its massive form toward me, the air trembling in anticipation. I felt the pull drag at my chest, as if it were trying to draw something out of me. My vision warped, tunneling inward. Then, light. Blinding white light erupted across the field, so sudden and powerful the creature recoiled. The pull snapped. I collapsed into the snow. When my sight cleared, someone was standing between me and the being. A silhouette, human, and familiar. The silhouette stood motionless, framed by the fading white radiance. As my eyes adjusted, the figure became recognizable: Caleb, the silent neighbor from the inn. But something was wrong. His outline shimmered, the edges bending like heat distortion. He didn't turn toward me. Instead, he raised his hand toward the creature, and the light expanded again. The being recoiled, its form unraveling like smoke in a storm. Caleb spoke without moving his lips. The words vibrated directly in my mind. "Not yet. You're not ready." My breath caught. He had been following me since the night I arrived. Maybe even before. Caleb stepped toward me, though his feet barely touched the snow. With every movement, parts of him lagged behind, like a broken video frame catching up. "There was a time," he said aloud now, his voice layered with echo, when these things stayed behind the threshold. When the door was only a myth. He crouched so our eyes were level. His irises were shifting patterns, circles inside circles, moving like clockwork. But humans no longer believe in boundaries. I tried to ask what he was, but the words jammed in my throat. Caleb smiled weakly, as though he understood my silence. Behind him the creature was reforming, its mass pulling itself together like a tide reversing direction. Caleb didn't turn. "It won't stop," he whispered. "Not until it retrieves what you took." My pulse spiked. "I didn't take anything," I managed to say. He shook his head. Stepping through the door was enough. The snow around us vibrated with a deep resonance, as though the field were becoming hollow beneath our feet. Caleb pressed something into my hand, a small, round object, smooth and warm. "This will keep you alive. For now. But you must go back." "What is it?" I asked, though the object in my hand seemed to pulse with faint light, as if alive. Caleb didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my shoulder and yanked me forward. The world snapped sideways. Sky, snow, creature, everything smeared into a single streak of gray. My stomach lurched. When the motion stopped, we were standing at the edge of Wexford, right outside the inn. The streets were empty. The sky was normal. No twisted horizon, no boiling darkness. Caleb released me. "They'll follow. All of them. You opened the first breach. More will come." I stared at the inn, trembling. "Why me?" Caleb shrugged. "Because you saw it. Most people don't. Most people can't." He tilted his head slightly, listening to something distant. "They're already here." I turned around. Nothing. Just empty street and falling snow. Caleb stepped back into the shadows as if blending with them. "Return the path. Close what you opened." His voice grew faint. "And whatever you do, don't trust the others." "What others?" I asked. But Caleb was gone. Inside the inn, the silence felt unnatural. The walls seemed thinner, as if holding back a rising tide. I hurried to my room and locked the door. The round object pulsed more intensely now, illuminating my palm with a faint golden glow. I placed it on the desk. Immediately the light spread across the wood in branching lines, like veins. I stepped back. The lines formed a map, an exact replica of Wexford, etched in light. A mark pulsed at the town's center. The church I had passed on my first day. Only now the light around it flickered violently, as though warning me. The church was the oldest building in Wexford, a relic predating most records. Locals avoided it. Even the innkeeper refused to discuss it. Now the map urged me there. A pulse vibrated through the floorboards, matching the object's rhythm. I realized with dread that the inn itself was responding to it. That meant the creatures could sense it too. I packed what little I had and slipped out into the night. Snow drifted in slow spirals, quieter than usual. As if the entire town were holding its breath again. The walk to the church felt longer than it should have been. Streets warped, stretching subtly, turning familiar corners into looping bends. Several times I passed the same mailbox. Wexford was twisting. As I approached the hill where the church stood, a heavy fog slid across the ground, swirling around my feet. The church's silhouette emerged. A tall, narrow structure leaning slightly forward, like a listening figure. Its windows were dark, yet faint red light pulsed behind them, in the same rhythm as the object in my pocket. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors. They groaned like something waking from sleep. Inside, the air was warmer than outside, humid, with a deep earthy smell. Candles burned along the walls although no one had tended to them. At the far end of the hall stood the altar, but it was covered in carvings not belonging to any religion I knew. Spirals, branches, elongated shapes reminiscent of the creature. The object in my pocket burned hot. I placed it on the altar. Immediately the symbols lit up, glowing with golden fire. The entire church trembled. Light raced through the carvings, forming a swirling pattern that lifted off the surface like liquid rising upward. The glow expanded, shaping itself into a circular frame, a doorway. But unlike the one in the field, this one showed something beyond. A vast landscape of towering shapes and distant lights. A world, or a prison. Footsteps echoed behind me. Slow, heavy, familiar. I turned. It wasn't Caleb. It was the innkeeper. And his eyes glowed with the same shifting patterns as the creature's. I tried leaving the house for at least a day, but after walking a few blocks, a strange echo struck my ears. Someone calling me from far away. I turned around. The sound didn't come from the city, but from my building. A dull thump like an enormous heartbeat. The echo repeated, louder. People around me didn't react at all, as if they couldn't hear it. I stepped back, and the call sharpened, almost joyful, as though the house was pleased I was returning. Chills ran across my skin. The echoes synchronized with my breathing, pulsing like something alive. When I stepped back into the entrance hall, the house exhaled, long, deep, like it had waited for me. Late in the evening, I heard cracking, like someone bending dry sticks behind the radiator. The noise repeated rhythmically and seemed to move along the wall. I crouched down and shone a flashlight. A shadow flickered between the pipes. But it didn't vanish. It quivered, as if deciding whether to move forward or stay. Then something long and bony crept out. Not a hand, not a paw. More like a thin jointed appendage. A finger stretched unnaturally far. It reached toward the light. I switched the flashlight off, and the cracking stopped instantly. A minute later, gentle tapping began, as if something asked, "Are you still there?" When I entered my room in the morning, it was different. The objects were in their usual places, but the distance between them felt altered, as if the room had been stretched. The bed looked longer, the window taller, and the walls seemed to have shifted a few centimeters outward. A strange sensation washed over me. I was being measured. As if the house checked how well I fit inside. When I sat on a chair, it creaked softly, and an echo of that creak responded from deeper within the wall. As if someone else sat down too. The curtain swayed slightly though the window was closed. The room was studying me. Today the neighbors decided to invite me. I stepped into the hallway and saw doors opening one by one, like they had been waiting. People stood motionless, forming a strange semicircle. One of them, a man with hollow eyes, said, "The house has chosen you." My throat went dry. The others nodded in agreement. The pale woman added, "It hears everything. It sees everything. We are part of it. And now, you are too." When I tried stepping back, the floor arched slightly, pushing me forward. The neighbors closed the circle. They had no shadows. That night, the walls began breathing. I heard a soft inhale, exhale, as if air passed through the concrete. Each inhale came with a faint crackling, like the house was growing. When I placed my hand on the wall, it was warm, alive. The floor vibrated slightly, like massive veins pumped beneath it. The breathing quickened, becoming desperate, as if the house tried to speak. Then it stopped, followed by a violent thud from inside, strong enough to shake loose plaster from the ceiling. Something inside the wall was trying to get out. In the basement I found a massive map of the city. Old streets intertwined with new ones, as if someone had drawn it for decades. But one object stood out above all: my building. Dozens of lines, circles, and symbols surrounded it, as if it were not a house but the city's heart. In the corner, a note read, "It grows." When I looked up, the basement had darkened. A dull thumping echoed from above, as if something moved through the floors. The map trembled, as though it, too, breathed. The water pipes began speaking. They transmitted faint phrases, as if someone walked through a metal corridor whispering against the walls. "He hears. He feels. He is ours." The words spread through the apartment like echoes. I shut off the tap. The voice continued, as if water wasn't needed. Then the pipes made a sound like crying. Not human, long, monotone, like the house mourned something. Then a whisper. "Go back downstairs. He's waiting." I descended into the basement. The air was thick, heavy, saturated with someone's breath. In the far corner stood a massive structure of pipes and cables. It pulsed. With every beat, the air vibrated. It was the heart of the house, alive, warm, enormous. As I approached, it reacted. One of the vessels shifted, opening slightly, as if inviting me. I felt the house watching every step. It was waiting. And I understood. The neighbors were right. The house wasn't just alive. It was conscious. The heart beat faster, sensing my hesitation. The house called me, gently, insistently. The walls creaked softly, matching the rhythm. I tried leaving, but the basement door slammed shut on its own. The pulsing grew stronger. The walls seemed to close around me. The neighbors' voices echoed from above, chanting as one. "Accept it." The house offered me a place. A place inside itself. I felt its warmth approaching, the vein pipes opening, inviting me to join its breath. But I wasn't ready to disappear. I gathered all my strength and rushed toward the door. It resisted, gripping me like a hand. But I struck it again and again until the wood cracked. The house howled, a long, painful sound. The heart thrashed violently, pipes slamming against the walls. But I broke free. I ran outside and turned back, then froze. The house changed. It breathed faster, wheezing, trying to keep me. The windows widened like eyes watching my every step. But I left. I crossed its boundary. When I looked back one last time, the house went still, like it had died. But I know it's only waiting for the next one.